The thunder cracked like a bullwhip across the Montana sky, as Olivia Matthews clung to the remains of her family's wagon, the churning floodwaters threatening to sweep away what little she had left in this world. She'd been traveling west with her aunt and uncle when the storm hit, turning the peaceful creek into a raging monster that had already claimed 2 lives, and now seemed intent on taking hers as well. It was 1878, and the promise of a new life in Helena had turned into a nightmare in the span of a single afternoon. Her fingernails dug into the splintered wood as another wave crashed over her, the cold water stealing her breath and her hope in equal measure. "Hold on, miss." The voice cut through the roar of the water, deep and steady like the earth beneath the torrent. Through the curtain of her sodden hair, Olivia glimpsed a rider on horseback, a tall figure silhouetted against the angry sky. He guided his mount along the treacherous bank, the powerful animal fighting against the current as they drew closer to her precarious position. "Take my hand," he called out, extending his arm toward her as he maneuvered his horse as close as safety would allow. Olivia hesitated for only a moment before releasing her grip on the wagon and reaching for him. Their fingers touched, slipped, then locked together as he hauled her from the water with strength that belied his lean frame. She collapsed against him, shivering and sobbing as he turned his horse away from the flood. "I've got you," he murmured, his voice a warm rumble against her ear. "You're safe now." The rain continued to fall as they rode toward a cluster of lights in the distance, but Olivia barely noticed. All she could focus on was the steady beat of the stranger's heart against her cheek, and the knowledge that, against all odds, she had survived. The settlement of Whitetail Creek came into view as they crested a small rise, a collection of wooden buildings huddled together against the elements. The stranger, Olivia still didn't know his name, guided his horse toward the largest structure, a 2-story building with a sign that proclaimed it to be the Silver Dollar Saloon. Elias, a burly man with an impressive mustache, burst through the saloon doors as they approached. "We thought you'd been caught in the flash flood." "Nearly was, Joseph," the stranger Elias replied, his arm tightening protectively around Olivia. "Found this young lady holding onto what's left of a wagon about a mile upstream." Joseph's expression shifted as he took in Olivia's bedraggled appearance. "Another one from that eastbound party. We've already got 3 of them inside, though they're not in much better shape." Hope flared in Olivia's chest. "My aunt and uncle." "Are they? Let's get you inside first," Elias said gently, sliding from the saddle and reaching up to help her down. "You're half frozen." The interior of the saloon was warm and smoky, the usual revelry subdued by the storm raging outside. Olivia's eyes darted frantically around the room until they landed on a familiar figure huddled near the fireplace. "Aunt Beatrice," she cried, rushing forward. The older woman looked up, her face pale but her eyes brightening. "Olivia! Oh, thank heavens!" They embraced, clinging to each other with the desperation of survivors, until Olivia pulled back to ask the question burning in her throat. "Uncle Thomas." Aunt Beatrice's face crumpled, and no words were needed. Olivia sank onto a nearby chair, the weight of loss settling over her like a shroud. "I'm sorry about your uncle," Elias said, appearing at her side with a blanket that he draped around her shoulders. "Sounds like he was trying to save the horses when the bank gave way." "That would be just like him," Olivia whispered, pulling the blanket tighter. "Always thinking of others before himself." Joseph approached with 2 steaming mugs, passing one to Olivia and the other to Elias. "Got a few rooms upstairs you ladies can use tonight," he said, nodding toward Beatrice. "Storm's not letting up anytime soon." "Thank you," Olivia said, wrapping her cold fingers around the hot drink. "We're grateful for your kindness." "Don't thank me," Joseph replied with a shrug. "Thank Elias here. He's the one who rode out into that mess to look for survivors." Olivia turned to the man beside her, really seeing him for the first time. He was younger than she'd initially thought, probably no more than 30, with dark hair plastered to his forehead and eyes the color of a summer sky. A day's worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, and despite his soaked clothing, he carried himself with quiet confidence. "Thank you," she said softly. "I owe you my life." Elias shook his head, a hint of color touching his cheeks. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Joseph countered. "They wouldn't have. Most folks around here had sense enough to stay indoors when that creek started rising." A commotion at the door interrupted their conversation as two more men burst in, water streaming from their oilskins. "Found another wagon downstream," one of them announced. "Nothing left but splinters and one dead mule." "Any sign of the family?" Joseph asked. The man shook his head grimly. "Not a trace, but we did find a strongbox." He hefted a small metal container onto the nearest table. "Figured someone might come looking for it." Aunt Beatrice gasped. "That's ours. All our savings were in there for our new start." The men exchanged glances. "Box was empty when we found it, madam. Water must have busted it open, scattered the contents." Olivia felt her aunt sag beside her. Everything they had, the money from selling their small farm back east, the funds for purchasing land in Helena, gone in an instant. "What will we do now?" Beatrice whispered, her voice breaking. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room, broken only by the drumming of rain on the roof and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. "You're welcome to stay here until you get back on your feet," Joseph offered, though his tone lacked conviction. "Might be able to find work for you in town." "That's very kind," Beatrice replied, "but we were headed to meet my late husband's brother in Helena. He's expecting us." "Helena's still a good 3 days' ride," one of the newcomers pointed out, "and that's with horses and a wagon, which you don't have anymore." "The stage comes through on Thursday," Joseph said, "but tickets ain't cheap." Olivia felt the walls closing in around them. They were stranded in a strange town with no transportation, no money, and precious few options. She squared her shoulders, determined not to show her fear. "We'll find a way," she said firmly. "We've come too far to turn back now." "Well, you won't be going anywhere tonight," Elias observed, rising to his feet. "Let me show you to those rooms Joseph mentioned. You both need rest." As they climbed the narrow staircase, Olivia was acutely aware of his presence behind her, solid and reassuring. They reached a small but clean room with a single bed, and Elias stepped back to give them space. "There's water in the pitcher if you want to wash up," he said, gesturing to a stand in the corner. "I'll see if I can find you some dry clothes." "Mr. Elias," Aunt Beatrice said, catching his sleeve before he could leave. "We can't thank you enough for saving Olivia. She's all I have left now." Something flickered in his eyes, sympathy perhaps, or understanding. "It's just Elias Harper, and there's no need for thanks." He hesitated, then added, "I lost my sister to a flood 3 years back. Couldn't save her. Glad I could be there for your niece." With that, he nodded once and disappeared down the hallway, leaving Olivia to wonder about the quiet pain she'd glimpsed beneath his calm exterior. Morning brought clear skies and a harsh reckoning. The flood had receded, leaving behind a landscape transformed by mud and debris. From the saloon's porch, Olivia could see the extent of the damage: uprooted trees, scattered belongings, and the carcasses of livestock that had been caught in the deluge. "It's worse than I thought," she murmured as Elias joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Creek's never risen that high in all the years I've been here," he said, passing her one of the cups. "Must have been raining in the mountains for days." Olivia accepted the coffee gratefully, savoring the bitter warmth. Have you lived in Whitetail Creek long? 5 years now. Came out from Pennsylvania looking for something different, found this place and never left. He leaned against the porch railing, his gaze sweeping over the ravaged landscape. What about you? Where were you headed before the storm hit? Helena, Olivia replied. My uncle had a brother there who offered us land. Said Montana was the place to make a fresh start. And before that, Missouri. My parents died of fever when I was 16. I've been living with my aunt and uncle ever since. She paused, watching a group of men drag a fallen tree from the road. They were good to me, treated me like their own daughter. Elias nodded, understanding in his eyes. And now I don't know, she admitted, her voice small. We have no money, no transportation, and Aunt Beatrice is not as strong as she pretends to be. The journey was already taking a toll on her before. Before you lost everything, Elias finished quietly. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Joseph and several other men from town, their expressions grim as they approached the porch. Town council met this morning, Joseph announced without preamble. Wanted to discuss what to do about those affected by the flood. Olivia straightened, sensing that whatever was coming would not be good news. We can offer temporary shelter for a few days, Joseph continued, avoiding her gaze, but our resources are limited. The stage to Helena costs $5 per person, which the town is willing to cover for your aunt. And me? Olivia asked, though she already knew the answer. One of the other men, a shopkeeper she'd seen the night before, cleared his throat. Truth is, miss, we can't afford to send both of you. Most of us are just getting by ourselves. I see, Olivia said, her voice remarkably steady despite the panic rising within her. And what am I supposed to do? There's work to be had here, Joseph said quickly. Cleaning at the saloon, helping at the general store. You could earn your keep until you save enough for your own ticket. You want to separate us? Aunt Beatrice appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. After everything we've been through, it's just temporary, madam, the shopkeeper insisted. For your own good. You need medical attention that you can get in Helena, and your brother-in-law is expecting you. He's expecting both of us, Beatrice countered. Be reasonable, another man spoke up, his tone hardening. Your niece is young and able-bodied. She'd just be a burden to you now with your health so fragile. Olivia flinched at the word burden, though she knew there was truth in it. Her aunt was not well, and the shock of losing Uncle Thomas had only worsened her condition. We're not separating, she said firmly. I'll find work here, save enough for both our tickets. That could take months, Joseph pointed out, and winter's coming. Stage routes get unreliable once the snow starts. The argument might have continued, but a new voice cut through the tension. She's not a burden. All eyes turned to Elias, who had been silent throughout the exchange. He set his coffee cup down with deliberate care. She's a blessing, he continued, meeting Olivia's startled gaze. To her aunt and to anyone with eyes to see it, and she's coming with me. A stunned silence fell over the porch. Coming with you where? Joseph finally asked. To my ranch. Elias straightened, his decision apparently made in that moment. I've got room for both of them. Mrs. Matthews can rest and recover her strength, and Miss Olivia can help around the place if she's so inclined. When they're ready to continue to Helena, I'll take them myself. Olivia stared at him, unable to comprehend the offer. Mr. Harper, you can't possibly. I can, he interrupted gently. And I am. Unless you'd prefer another arrangement, the men from town shifted uncomfortably, none willing to offer an alternative. Joseph looked torn between relief and concern. Elias, you sure about this? Taking in 2 strangers is a big responsibility. I'm sure. His tone brooked no argument. My wagon's out back. We can leave whenever you ladies are ready. With that, he nodded to Olivia and her aunt, then strode off the porch toward the stables, leaving a wake of bewildered onlookers behind him. "Well," Aunt Beatrice said after a moment, a hint of her old spirit returning. "That seems to settle matters, doesn't it?" Olivia wasn't so certain. Elias Harper was still a stranger, and his unexpected offer raised as many questions as it answered. But as she watched him walk away, his shoulders set with quiet determination, she couldn't deny the flutter of hope in her chest. For the first time since the flood, she felt like they might just survive after all. The Harper Ranch lay 10 miles outside of Whitetail Creek, nestled in a valley protected by rolling hills and stands of pine. As Elias's wagon crested the final rise, Olivia caught her first glimpse of what would be their temporary home, a sturdy log cabin with a covered porch, a large barn, and several smaller outbuildings, all arranged around a central yard. It wasn't grand by any means, but the property showed signs of careful maintenance and thoughtful planning. A vegetable garden flourished beside the cabin, and a small orchard of apple trees grew to the east. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, suggesting someone was already there. "It's lovely," Aunt Beatrice murmured from her place beside Olivia on the wagon seat. The older woman had rallied somewhat during their journey, though fatigue still lined her face. "Nothing special," Elias replied from where he walked alongside the horses, "but it's home." As they drew closer, the cabin door swung open and an older woman emerged, wiping her hands on an apron. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her weathered face broke into a smile when she spotted the wagon. "There you are," she called out. "I was beginning to worry. Mrs. Larson," Elias greeted her. "Hope you haven't been waiting long." "Only since yesterday," the woman replied, her gaze shifting curiously to Olivia and Beatrice. "Joseph rode out last night to tell me you'd been caught up in town with the flood victims." Elias guided the wagon to a stop before the cabin. "Mrs. Beatrice Matthews, Miss Olivia Matthews, this is Mrs. Larson. She helps me around the place a few days a week. And make sure he doesn't live entirely on coffee and jerky," Mrs. Larson added with a chuckle, approaching the wagon. "You poor dears look exhausted. Come inside where it's warm." Elias helped Beatrice down first, then offered his hand to Olivia. His touch was brief but steady, and despite herself, she felt a spark of awareness travel up her arm. He released her quickly, turning his attention to unhitching the horses. "I've got stew simmering and fresh bread cooling," Mrs. Larson was saying as she ushered them toward the cabin. "Nothing better after a journey." The interior of the cabin was surprisingly spacious, with a large main room that served as kitchen, dining area, and living space. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and handcrafted furniture, a table with 6 chairs, a comfortable-looking sofa, and several armchairs filled the space without crowding it. 2 doors led off the main room, presumably to bedrooms. "It's wonderful," Olivia said, genuinely impressed by the warmth and comfort of the place. It was rustic but welcoming, with small touches that spoke of care, a colorful quilt draped over the sofa, wildflowers in a jar on the table, well-worn books stacked beside one of the chairs. "Elias built most of it himself," Mrs. Larson said proudly as she moved to the stove. "Started with just a one-room cabin and kept adding on. The man's got talent with his hands, though he'd never admit it." As if summoned by her words, Elias entered, carrying the small bag that contained Olivia and Beatrice's few salvaged possessions. He set it down near the door, looking slightly uncomfortable with Mrs. Larson's praise. "Mrs. Larson exaggerates," he said. "I'd have fallen through my own roof without her husband's help." "False modesty," the older woman countered, ladling stew into bowls. "Now sit and eat, all of you. Food first, Then we'll get these ladies settled." They gathered around the table, and for a moment, Olivia was struck by the strange domesticity of it all, sharing a meal with these strangers, who had shown more kindness in a day than many had in a lifetime. Aunt Beatrice said a brief grace, and then they ate in companionable silence, the simple food more satisfying than any feast. "I've prepared the second bedroom for you ladies," Mrs. Larson said as they finished. "Elias can sleep out here on the sofa for now." "I couldn't possibly displace you from your room," Beatrice protested, looking to Elias. "It's no trouble," he assured her. "I often fall asleep by the fire anyway." "At least until we figure out something more permanent," Olivia added, not wanting to presume on his hospitality. A brief frown crossed Elias's face. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need. There's no rush." "That's very generous," Beatrice said, "but we don't want to impose. Once I've regained my strength, we should continue to Helena. My brother-in-law is expecting us." "Of course," Elias agreed, though Olivia thought she detected a hint of disappointment in his tone. "But that won't be for a while yet. In the meantime, consider this your home. After dinner, Mrs. Larson showed them to their room, a cozy space with a large bed, a chest of drawers, and a small writing desk beneath the window. She'd left clean nightgowns and some simple day dresses that she explained had belonged to her daughter. "She's married and living in Bozeman now," Mrs. Larson said as Olivia ran her fingers over the soft calico. "These have just been gathering dust. I'm glad they'll be of use." "You're too kind," Olivia murmured, overwhelmed by the generosity of these people who owed them nothing. Mrs. Larson patted her hand. "It's not kindness, dear. It's community. Out here, we all have to look after each other. Someday you'll do the same for someone else." After she left, Aunt Beatrice sank onto the edge of the bed, fatigue evident in every line of her body. "I don't know what we would have done without Mr. Harper," she said softly. "To think, yesterday morning we were on our way to a new life with your uncle, and now—" "We're still going to have that new life," Olivia assured her, sitting beside her aunt and taking her hand. "Just with a slight detour. Once you're stronger, we'll continue to Helena as planned." Beatrice squeezed her hand. "You're a good girl, Olivia. Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become." Later, after her aunt had fallen asleep, Olivia slipped from the bedroom, drawn by the soft glow of the fireplace in the main room. She found Elias there, seated in one of the armchairs, a book open on his lap but his gaze fixed on the flames. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," she said quietly. He looked up, surprise giving way to a small smile. "Not at all. Can't sleep." "Too many thoughts," she admitted, moving to the other chair. "I wanted to thank you properly for everything you've done." Elias closed his book, setting it aside. "There's no need." "There is," Olivia insisted. "You saved my life, offered us shelter when others would have separated us, and asked for nothing in return. I have to wonder why." A log shifted in the fireplace, sending up a shower of sparks. Elias watched them fade before answering. 3 years ago," he began slowly, "my sister and her husband were caught in a flash flood much like the one yesterday. They were traveling to visit me. I'd been asking them to come for months." He paused, his expression distant. "They never arrived. By the time I found them, it was too late." "I'm so sorry," Olivia whispered. "After that, I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to help someone else in similar circumstances, I would." He met her gaze, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "When I saw you holding onto that wagon in the flood, I thought for a moment you were my sister. You have the same color hair." Olivia touched her auburn locks self-consciously. "I see. But that's not why I offered you and your aunt a place to stay," Elias continued. "I did that because it was the right thing to do, because no one should face such loss alone. Still, Olivia said, it's a considerable inconvenience to you. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Miss Matthews, I live alone on a ranch 10 miles from the nearest town. A little inconvenience is welcome company. She couldn't help but return his smile. Well, I promise we won't be a burden. I'm a hard worker. I can cook, clean, tend a garden, whatever you need to make our stay worthwhile. You're not a burden, Elias said firmly, echoing his words from earlier that day. But I won't refuse help around the place if you're offering. There's always plenty to do. They fell into comfortable silence for a few moments, the crackling fire the only sound in the room. Olivia studied him surreptitiously, the strong profile, the thoughtful eyes, the capable hands that had pulled her from the floodwaters. There was something about Elias Harper that inspired confidence, a steadiness that seemed rare in a world so often turned upside down. May I ask you something? She ventured. He nodded, his expression open. You said you came from Pennsylvania 5 years ago. What brought you all the way to Montana territory? Elias stretched his legs toward the fire, considering her question. I was restless, I suppose. Had a good job at my father's lumber mill, a comfortable life, but something was missing. When I read about the opportunities out west, I decided to see for myself. A wry smile crossed his face. My father thought I'd be back within a month. 5 years later, here I am. No regrets. Some days, he admitted. Especially in winter when the snow piles up and the wind finds every crack in these walls. But mostly no. There's a freedom here I never found back east. Olivia nodded, understanding completely. She'd felt that same yearning for something more, something different from the quiet life she'd led in Missouri. What about you? Elias asked. What were you hoping to find in Helena? A fresh start, she replied simply. After my parents died, nothing felt quite right anymore. When Uncle Thomas suggested joining them on their journey west, it seemed like the answer to prayers I hadn't even known I was saying. And now, Olivia gazed into the fire, considering the question. Now I'm not sure. Everything's changed so quickly. But I still want that fresh start, wherever it might be. You'll find it, Elias said with quiet certainty. You strike me as a woman who doesn't give up easily. His words warmed her more than the fire ever could. Thank you for that, and for listening. Anytime. He rose from his chair, adding another log to the fire. You should try to get some sleep. Tomorrow I can show you around the place if you'd like. I'd like that very much, Olivia replied, standing as well. She hesitated, then impulsively held out her hand. Good night, Mr. Harper. He took her hand in his, the brief contact sending that same inexplicable awareness through her. Elias, he reminded her gently. Just Elias. Good night, Elias, she amended, her voice softer than she'd intended. Good night, Olivia, he returned, and the sound of her name on his lips followed her back to the bedroom, where she fell asleep wondering what tomorrow would bring in this unexpected sanctuary. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that surprised Olivia with its comfort. Each morning she rose with the sun, helping Mrs. Larson prepare breakfast before the older woman departed for her own home a mile down the road. Elias would be up even earlier, tending to the livestock before joining them for the morning meal. Aunt Beatrice, still recovering from the ordeal of the flood and the loss of Uncle Thomas, often rested through the mornings, but gradually began to join them for longer periods each day. The quiet of the ranch and the nourishing food seemed to be restoring her strength bit by bit. True to his word, Elias showed Olivia around the property that first morning, the barn with its 4 horses and 2 milk cows, the chicken coop, the workshop where he repaired equipment and crafted furniture in the winter months, and the sprawling pasture where a small herd of cattle grazed under the watchful eye of his dog, a black and white border collie named Scout. "It's not a large operation," he explained as they walked the perimeter of the fenced area, "but it's enough to keep me in beef and provide some income. I sell most of the calves each fall." "It's impressive," Olivia said sincerely, "especially for one man managing alone. I hire help for the bigger jobs, branding, moving the herd to summer pasture, that sort of thing. But day to day, it's mostly just me and Scout." The dog in question trotted over at the sound of his name, circling them once before racing back to his charges. "He's wonderful," Olivia laughed, watching the animal work. "So clever. Smarter than me most days," Elias agreed with a fond smile. "Been with me since he was a pup. Don't know what I'd do without him." As the days passed, Olivia found herself increasingly drawn into the rhythms of ranch life. She helped Mrs. Larson with the household tasks, learned to milk the cows under Elias's patient instruction, and tended the vegetable garden with growing confidence. In the evenings, they would gather in the main room, Elias often working on small wood-carving projects, Aunt Beatrice mending clothes or reading, and Olivia learning to knit under Mrs. Larson's guidance. It was a simple life, far removed from what she had imagined for herself in Helena, but there was a satisfaction in it that she hadn't anticipated. Each task completed, each skill mastered, gave her a sense of accomplishment that had been missing in her life for too long. And then there was Elias himself. Quiet and reserved at first, he gradually opened up as they worked alongside each other. She learned about his childhood in Pennsylvania, his dreams for expanding the ranch, his passion for literature that explained the surprisingly well-stocked bookshelf in his home. In turn, she shared stories of her parents, her love of music, her hopes for someday having a family of her own. They fell into an easy companionship, comfortable in each other's presence even when words weren't necessary. Olivia found herself looking forward to their conversations, to the moments when his serious expression would break into a rare smile, to the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him. It was dangerous territory, she knew. Their stay was temporary, a kindness extended in a time of need. Soon enough, Aunt Beatrice would be well enough to travel, and they would continue to Helena as planned. Becoming too attached to this place, to this man, would only make the inevitable departure more painful. And yet, she couldn't seem to stop her heart from warming whenever Elias entered a room, or her spirits from lifting at the sound of his voice. It was a complication she hadn't foreseen, and one she wasn't sure how to address. The matter came to a head one evening in early September, nearly 3 weeks after their arrival at the ranch. Aunt Beatrice had retired early, leaving Olivia and Elias alone by the fire. Outside, a gentle rain pattered against the roof, creating a cozy backdrop to their conversation. "Mrs. Larson mentioned that your aunt seems much improved," Elias said, his hands busy with a piece of wood he was shaping into what looked like a small horse. "Yes," Olivia agreed, setting aside her knitting. "The rest has done her a world of good. She's almost herself again." Elias nodded, his focus seemingly on his carving. "I suppose you'll be thinking about continuing your journey soon, then?" Something in his tone made Olivia study him more closely. "I suppose we should," she said carefully, "though we still have the matter of transportation and funds to consider." "I meant what I said about taking you to Helena myself," Elias replied, still not meeting her gaze. "Whenever you're ready." A strange tension had entered the room, unspoken words hanging in the air between them. Olivia found herself reluctant to pursue the topic of their departure, though she knew it was inevitable. "That's very generous," she finally said, "but I hate to take you away from the ranch for so long." "It's no trouble." The knife in his hand stilled and he looked up at last. "Unless you're in a hurry to leave." There it was, the question beneath the question. Olivia took a deep breath, uncertain how to respond. The truth was, she wasn't in a hurry to leave at all. These weeks at the Harper Ranch had brought her a peace she hadn't expected to find, a sense of belonging that had been missing since her parents' deaths. "I'm not," she admitted quietly. "In fact, I've come to love it here." Something flickered in Elias's eyes, hope perhaps, or relief. "Have you?" "Yes." Olivia twisted her hands in her lap, suddenly nervous. "Everything about it, the land, the work, the simplicity of the days. It feels right somehow." Elias set his carving aside, leaning forward in his chair. "And what about the company?" Her heart quickened at the directness of his question. "The company most of all," she whispered. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the steady rain outside. Then Elias rose from his chair, crossing the short distance between them to kneel before her. "Olivia," he said, his voice low and earnest, "I know we haven't known each other long and I have no right to ask this of you, but—" He hesitated, then forged ahead. "Would you consider staying, not just for a while, but permanently?" She stared at him, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. "What are you saying, Elias?" He took her hands in his, their warmth enveloping her. "I'm saying that these past weeks have shown me what's been missing from my life, not just company, but your company specifically. Your strength, your kindness, your determination. I find myself dreading the day you'll leave because I've come to care for you more than I thought possible in such a short time." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, unexpected but welcome. "I've come to care for you too," she confessed. "More than I should, perhaps." "There is no should in matters of the heart," Elias said, a smile breaking across his face. "Only what is." He squeezed her hands gently. "I'm not asking for an answer now. You have your aunt to consider and your plans for Helena. But I wanted you to know how I feel before you make any decisions." Olivia nodded, her mind whirling with possibilities she hadn't dared to consider until now. "Thank you for your honesty. I need some time to think, to talk with Aunt Beatrice." "Of course." He rose, though he kept hold of one of her hands. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." The simplicity of his promise touched her deeply. Here was a man who said what he meant and stood by his word, a rarity in a world where so much was uncertain. Impulsively, she stood as well, bringing them face to face. Before she could lose her courage, she leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Elias." His eyes widened in surprise, then softened with affection. "Good night, Olivia." She retreated to her bedroom, her heart lighter than it had been in years, despite the weighty decision before her. As she prepared for bed, she found herself humming a tune her mother used to sing, a song about finding home in unexpected places. Perhaps, she thought as she drifted toward sleep, home wasn't a place at all, but a feeling. And perhaps she had already found it, here in this valley, with a quiet cowboy who had called her a blessing when others saw only a burden. Morning found Olivia sitting on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the early chill, watching the sun rise over the eastern hills. She had slept little, her mind too full of Elias's words and the choice that lay before her. The sound of the door opening behind her announced Aunt Beatrice's arrival. The older woman joined her on the bench, her own shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. "You're up early," she observed, her keen eyes studying Olivia's face. "Troubled thoughts?" Olivia smiled faintly. Her aunt had always been perceptive. Not troubled exactly, just complicated. "Ah," Beatrice nodded as if confirming a suspicion. "This wouldn't have anything to do with our host, would it?" A blush warmed Olivia's cheeks despite the cool morning air. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who knows you as well as I do," her aunt replied with a gentle smile, "and who has seen the way Mr. Harper looks at you when he thinks no one is watching." Olivia turned to face her aunt fully. He's asked me to stay, Aunt Beatrice, not just for a while, but permanently. If the older woman was surprised by this revelation, she didn't show it. Instead, she reached out to pat Olivia's hand. "And what did you tell him?" "That I needed time to think to talk with you." Olivia hesitated, then added, "We were supposed to go to Helena together to start our new life there. I wouldn't feel right making this decision without your blessing." Beatrice's expression softened. "My dear girl, did you think I would stand in the way of your happiness? I've seen how content you are here, how naturally you've taken to this life." She gestured toward the ranch spread out before them, bathed in the golden light of dawn. "This suits you in a way I'm not sure Helena ever would have." "But what about you?" Olivia pressed. "What about your brother-in-law, the plans we made?" "Thomas's brother will understand," Beatrice said firmly. "As for me, well." She gazed out at the horizon, a wistful smile touching her lips. "I'm an old woman, Olivia. I've had my great love, my adventures. Now it's your turn." "You're hardly old," Olivia protested. "And I wouldn't abandon you." "No one is talking about abandonment," her aunt replied. "In fact, I've been giving this some thought myself. Mrs. Larson mentioned that the widow who runs the boarding house in town is looking for help. Said she needs someone to manage the place while she visits her daughter in California for the winter." Olivia stared at her aunt in surprise. "You've been considering staying in Whitetail Creek." "It seemed worth exploring," Beatrice acknowledged. "The climate agrees with me, and it would be a way to earn my keep without being a burden on you or Mr. Harper." "You could never be a burden," Olivia said automatically, echoing Elias's words from weeks before. "Nevertheless, I value my independence, just as your uncle did." Beatrice squeezed Olivia's hand. "This way, I'd be close enough to see you regularly, but you and Mr. Harper would have the privacy a young couple needs." Olivia felt a rush of gratitude for her aunt's understanding and practicality. "You make it sound so simple." "It can be if you let it," Beatrice replied. "The question is, what does your heart tell you?" Olivia closed her eyes, allowing herself to truly feel what had been growing inside her these past weeks. The answer came with surprising clarity. "That I love him," she whispered. "That I want to build a life here with him." "Then there's your answer." Beatrice's voice held a note of triumph. "Love is too precious to waste on what ifs and might have beens. When you find it, you must hold on to it with both hands." Opening her eyes, Olivia embraced her aunt tightly. "Thank you," she murmured, "for understanding, for your blessing." "My only wish has ever been for your happiness," Beatrice replied, returning the embrace. "If that happiness lies here with Elias Harper, then so be it." They sat together in companionable silence as the sun continued its ascent, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. In the distance, Olivia could see Elias emerging from the barn, Scout at his heels. He paused, seeming to sense her gaze, and lifted a hand in greeting. Olivia waved back, her heart full to bursting with the possibilities that stretched before her like the boundless Montana sky. "Go to him," Aunt Beatrice urged gently. "Tell him your decision." With a grateful smile for her aunt, Olivia rose and descended the porch steps. She crossed the yard, her pace quickening as Elias started toward her, a question in his eyes. They met in the middle of the yard, morning light casting long shadows behind them. "Good morning," Elias said, his voice carefully neutral though his eyes betrayed his hope. "Good morning," Olivia replied, suddenly shy despite her certainty. "I've been thinking about what you asked last night." He nodded, waiting patiently for her to continue. "I've talked with Aunt Beatrice," she went on, gathering her courage. "She thinks, that is, we both think, that I should stay here with you." The words tumbled out in a rush, and she took a deep breath before adding more softly, "If the offer still stands." The transformation of Elias's expression was like watching the sun break through clouds, gradual at first, then blazing with undisguised joy. "It stands," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "It will always stand, Olivia." Without warning, he closed the distance between them, gathering her into his arms with a fervor that left her breathless. She clung to him, laughing and crying all at once, overwhelmed by the rightness of it all. When he finally set her back on her feet, his hands remained at her waist, as if he couldn't bear to release her completely. "I should have said it last night," he murmured, his gaze holding hers. "I love you, Olivia Matthews. I think I have since I pulled you from that flood, and you looked at me with those determined eyes, refusing to be defeated even then." "I love you too," she whispered, the words both strange and familiar on her tongue. "I didn't expect to find you or this place, but now I can't imagine being anywhere else." His smile was radiant as he leaned down, pausing just a breath away from her lips. "May I?" he asked. Ever the gentleman, in answer, Olivia rose on her toes, closing the final distance between them. His lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deepening with a promise of all that was to come. His arms tightened around her, and she felt as though she had finally, truly come home. From the porch, Aunt Beatrice watched with a smile of satisfaction, then quietly retreated into the cabin to give the young couple their privacy. Some moments, she knew, were meant to be shared only with the Montana sky as witness. Word of Olivia and Elias's engagement spread quickly through Whitetail Creek, met with a mixture of surprise and approval. Joseph, the saloon owner who had been among those suggesting Olivia would be a burden to her aunt, was particularly shamefaced when he encountered the couple in town. "Seems I misjudged the situation," he admitted gruffly. "And you," he added with a nod to Olivia. "Mrs. Larson says you've taken to ranch life like you were born to it." "No offense taken," Olivia assured him, her hand comfortably tucked in Elias's arm. "Things have worked out for the best." Indeed they had. With Aunt Beatrice happily settled as temporary manager of the boarding house in town, preparations for the wedding moved forward. They decided on a simple ceremony in mid-October, before the winter weather made travel difficult for guests from neighboring ranches. Mrs. Larson threw herself into the planning with enthusiasm, insisting that her daughter's wedding dress could be altered to fit Olivia perfectly. "It's been packed away for 3 years," she declared. "High time it brought joy to someone else." The dress in question was a marvel of ivory silk and delicate lace, far more elegant than anything Olivia could have hoped for. When she tried it on for the first fitting, Mrs. Larson's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, my dear," the older woman said, clasping her hands together. "You look absolutely beautiful. Elias won't know what hit him." Olivia smoothed her hands over the lustrous fabric, hardly recognizing herself in the small mirror. "It's too much," she protested weakly. "I can't accept something so precious." "Nonsense," Mrs. Larson replied firmly. "My Sarah wore it for 1 day. It deserves a longer life than that. Besides," she added with a wink, "I expect to be invited to the christening of your first child, so consider it an investment in future celebrations." Olivia blushed furiously at this reference to the intimate aspect of marriage that awaited her, but couldn't deny the flutter of anticipation the thought provoked. The idea of creating a family with Elias, of children running through the ranch house and playing in the yard, filled her with a deep longing she'd scarcely acknowledged to herself. As the wedding day approached, Elias worked tirelessly on an addition to the cabin, a new bedroom that would give them more space and privacy. Olivia often brought him lunch while he worked, marveling at his skill with tools and his vision for their home. "It's not the grand house your uncle might have provided in Helena," he said one afternoon as they sat in the shade, sharing a simple meal of bread, cheese, and apples. "I never wanted grand," Olivia replied truthfully. "I wanted a home, a place that felt like it was truly mine." She leaned against his shoulder, comfortable in the casual intimacy they had developed. "You've given me that, Elias, more than I ever dreamed possible." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head, his arm warm around her waist. "We've given it to each other," he corrected gently. "Everything is better with you here, Olivia. The work, the quiet evenings, even the prospect of winter doesn't seem so daunting now." She laughed, turning to face him. "I've never experienced a Montana winter. What should I expect?" A mischievous glint appeared in his eyes. "Snow up to the windowsills. Days when it's too cold to venture outside. Long nights by the fire." His voice dropped to a murmur as he leaned closer. "I can think of worse ways to pass the time." His kiss was warm and unhurried, a promise of the intimacy they would soon share as husband and wife. Olivia melted into it, her heart racing with love and anticipation. The night before the wedding, a letter arrived from Helena, a response from Uncle Thomas's brother to the news Aunt Beatrice had sent weeks earlier. Olivia read it with her aunt in the parlor of the boarding house, anxious to know if their change in plans had caused offense. "He sends his congratulations," Beatrice reported with evident relief. "Says he understands completely and is pleased we've found happiness here." She scanned further down the page. "He also says the land he was offering us is still available if we ever change our minds, but he suspects we won't need it now." "That's a relief," Olivia sighed. "I would have hated to disappoint him after all his kindness." "Family understands these things," her aunt replied, folding the letter carefully. "And speaking of family," she rose and retrieved a small box from a nearby shelf. "I've been saving this for tomorrow, but I think now is the right time." She handed the box to Olivia, who opened it with curious fingers. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a delicate gold locket. "It was your mother's," Beatrice explained softly. "Your father gave it to her on their wedding day. I've kept it all these years, waiting for the right moment to pass it on to you." Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes as she lifted the locket from the box. It was simple but beautiful, with a subtle floral pattern etched into the surface. When she pressed the tiny clasp, it opened to reveal a miniature portrait of her parents on their wedding day, their young faces radiant with happiness. "Oh, Aunt Beatrice," she whispered, clutching the precious keepsake to her heart. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll wear it tomorrow," her aunt replied, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "And that you'll remember how much they loved you, how proud they would be of the woman you've become." Olivia embraced her aunt tightly, overcome with emotion. "I will," she promised. "Every day." Later, as she walked back to the ranch with Mrs. Larson as her chaperone, tradition dictating that she not see Elias the night before the wedding, Olivia's hand kept straying to the locket now hanging around her neck. It felt like a benediction from her parents, a connection to the past as she stepped into her future. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the aspens in the valley glowing gold against the deep blue of the autumn sky. From the window of Mrs. Larson's house, where she had spent the night, Olivia could see the small white church in the distance, its steeple catching the morning light. "Perfect day for a wedding," Mrs. Larson declared as she helped Olivia with the final touches of her toilette. The ivory dress fit beautifully, and Aunt Beatrice had arranged Olivia's auburn hair in an elegant style, with small white flowers woven through the curls. "You look like an angel," her aunt said, stepping back to admire the effect. "Elias is a fortunate man indeed." "I'm the fortunate one," Olivia replied, touching the locket at her throat for reassurance. Despite her certainty about marrying Elias, she couldn't help the flutter of nerves in her stomach. This was, after all, the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one far different from anything she had imagined. The small church was filled to capacity when they arrived, the entire community having turned out for the occasion. Olivia waited in the vestibule with her aunt, who would walk her down the aisle in place of her father. Through the partially open door, she could see Elias standing at the altar, tall and handsome in a new suit, his expression a mixture of nervousness and anticipation that mirrored her own feelings. "Ready, my dear?" Aunt Beatrice asked as the piano began to play. Olivia took a deep breath, then nodded. "More than ready." The congregation rose as they entered, but Olivia barely noticed. Her attention was fixed solely on Elias, whose face transformed with wonder as he caught sight of her. The love in his eyes as she approached was so palpable it nearly took her breath away. When Aunt Beatrice placed her hand in Elias's, the warmth of his grip steadied her, grounding her in the moment. His whispered, "You're beautiful," was for her ears alone, a private communication in the midst of this public ceremony. The minister's words washed over her solemn promises of love, honor, and commitment, but it was Elias's vows that truly touched her heart. "Olivia," he began, his voice clear and strong despite the emotion evident in his eyes, "when I found you in that flood, I thought I was saving you. But the truth is, you saved me. From loneliness, from a life half lived, from the fear of opening my heart again after loss." He squeezed her hands gently. "I promise to cherish you all the days of my life, to build a home and a family with you, to face whatever storms may come with the same courage you've shown from the moment we met." Tears blurred Olivia's vision as she spoke her own vows, her voice steady despite the overwhelming emotion in her heart. "Elias, you saw value in me when others saw only burden. You offered shelter when I was lost, strength when I was weak, and love when I least expected it." She smiled through her tears. "I promise to stand beside you through all seasons, to make our house a home filled with warmth and laughter, to love you faithfully until my last breath." The exchange of rings, a simple gold band for her, a matching one for him, sealed their promises. And when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Elias's kiss was both tender and passionate, a perfect beginning to their life together. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, the yard transformed with lanterns and garlands of autumn leaves. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by every family in the community, and a small band of local musicians provided lively tunes for dancing. As evening approached, Olivia found herself momentarily alone, watching the festivities from the porch steps. Elias was deep in conversation with some of the neighboring ranchers, his face animated as he discussed the prospects for winter grazing. Aunt Beatrice was seated with Mrs. Larson and several other older women, clearly enjoying their company. A sense of profound contentment washed over Olivia. This was her life now, these people, this place, this man who had become the center of her world in such a short time. The path that had led her here was marked by loss and hardship, but standing on the other side, she could see how each step had been necessary to bring her to this moment. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Harper." Elias's voice broke into her reverie as he joined her on the steps, offering a cup of cider. "Mrs. Harper." The name still felt new and wonderful. "Just counting my blessings," she replied, accepting both the cider and the arm he slipped around her waist. "And do they add up satisfactorily?" he teased, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Beyond measure," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "Though I must admit, I'm looking forward to when our guests depart and we have the place to ourselves again." A slow smile spread across Elias's face, his eyes darkening with promise. "As am I, wife. As am I." The word wife on his lips sent a thrill through her, along with a flutter of anticipation for the night to come. They had been scrupulously proper throughout their courtship, Elias ever mindful of her reputation and his own honor. But tonight, the boundaries that had kept them apart would fall away, and they would truly become one in every sense. As if reading her thoughts, Elias tightened his arm around her waist. "Another hour or so," he murmured, "and we can make our excuses." The prediction proved accurate. As twilight deepened into night, the older guests began to depart, followed gradually by the younger ones, until only the closest friends and family remained. Aunt Beatrice was the last to leave, embracing Olivia with tears in her eyes. "Be happy, my dear," she whispered. "You deserve every joy." And then, finally, they were alone. Elias closed the door behind the last guest, then turned to face Olivia, his expression a mixture of love, desire, and a touch of uncertainty that endeared him to her all the more. "Well, Mrs. Harper," he said, crossing the room to take her hands in his, "welcome home." Olivia smiled up at him, her heart full to bursting. "It's been home since the day you brought me here," she said softly. "You've been home." His kiss was tender at first, then deepening with a passion they had kept carefully banked until now. When he finally lifted his head, they were both breathless. "I love you, Olivia Harper," he murmured against her lips, "more than I have words to express." "Then show me," she whispered, her courage surprising her. "Show me how much you love me." The look in his eyes, wonder, desire, and infinite tenderness, was answer enough as he swept her into his arms and carried her toward their bedroom, toward the beginning of their life together as husband and wife. Spring came early to the valley that year, the snow melting to reveal tender green shoots pushing through the soil. On the Harper Ranch, the season brought not only new calves and foals, but a more personal blessing as well. Olivia stood at the bedroom window, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly as she watched Elias in the yard below. He was repairing the corral fence, his movements efficient and practiced, Scout keeping vigilant watch from nearby. 6 months of marriage had only deepened her love for him, each day bringing new discoveries, new reasons to be grateful for the path that had led her to his side. She had told him about the baby just the week before, though she'd suspected for nearly a month. His reaction had been everything she could have hoped for: joy, wonder, and a protective tenderness that manifested in his insistence that she rest more and leave the heavier chores to him. "As if I'm made of glass," she murmured, smiling at the memory of their good-natured argument about whether she should continue helping with the morning milking. She had won that round, but conceded on the matter of lifting heavy water buckets. A knock at the front door drew her attention from the window. Descending the stairs carefully, another of Elias's concerns, though she assured him she was perfectly steady. She opened the door to find Aunt Beatrice, a basket over her arm. "Good morning, my dear," her aunt greeted her cheerfully. "I thought I'd bring you some of the preserves I put up last fall. The blackberry in particular turned out well." "Come in," Olivia welcomed her with a hug. "You're just in time for coffee." As they settled at the kitchen table, Olivia couldn't help but notice how well her aunt looked. The past months in Whitetail Creek had agreed with her. The boarding house position had become permanent, and she had developed a circle of friends that kept her busy with social engagements. "You're glowing," Beatrice observed, her keen eyes taking in Olivia's appearance. "Motherhood suits you already." Olivia laughed, pouring coffee for them both. "I'm not sure it's motherhood yet so much as anticipation, and a very attentive husband who insists I'm more beautiful than ever." "A wise man, you're Elias," Beatrice nodded approvingly. "Have you thought about names yet?" "If it's a boy, we thought perhaps Thomas after Uncle," Olivia replied, touched by the pleasure that lit her aunt's face at this news. "And if it's a girl, maybe Sarah, after Mrs. Larson's daughter. She's been like a mother to me these past months." "Both lovely choices," Beatrice approved. "And speaking of Mrs. Larson, she mentioned that the two of you are planning to expand the vegetable garden this year." "Yes, we thought with the baby coming, it would be good to have more put by for winter." Olivia's hand strayed to her belly, a gesture that had become habitual. "Elias is talking about building a proper root cellar as well." Their conversation continued, comfortable and familiar, until Elias came in from his work, greeting Beatrice warmly before dropping a kiss on the top of Olivia's head. "How are my two favorite people today?" he asked, his hand joining hers over the baby. "We're perfect," Olivia assured him, leaning into his touch. "Though your son or daughter seems to be practicing for a career as a dancer." Elias's face lit up with wonder, as it did every time she mentioned the baby's movements. "May I?" he asked, and at her nod he knelt beside her chair, placing both hands on her belly to feel the fluttering kicks. Beatrice watched them with a smile, her eyes suspiciously bright. "You know," she said after a moment, "when that terrible flood took Thomas from us, I thought our lives were ruined. I couldn't imagine how we would go on." She reached across the table to take Olivia's hand. "But look at what's come from that tragedy. A marriage, a home, a child on the way. Life has a way of bringing blessings from the most unexpected places." "You were never a burden, Aunt Beatrice," Olivia said firmly, understanding the unspoken sentiment behind her words. "Neither of us were." "No," Elias agreed, rising to his feet but keeping one hand on Olivia's shoulder. "You were both blessings from the start. That's why I couldn't let them separate you in town, why I brought you here." His voice softened as he looked down at his wife. "Though I had no idea then what a greater blessing was in store for me." As Olivia gazed up at her husband, his face filled with love for her and their unborn child, she thought of that day by the flooded creek, of the moment when his hand had found hers in the churning water. One moment, one decision, had changed the course of both their lives. "We're the fortunate ones," she said softly, including her aunt in her smile. "To have found each other, to have made a family together." Later, after Beatrice had departed and the day's work was done, Olivia and Elias sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and rose. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him, their free hands entwined over the child growing beneath her heart. "Are you happy, Olivia?" Elias asked, his voice a gentle rumble against her ear. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the losses, the hardships, the unexpected turns that had seemed like disasters at the time. And then she thought of the life they had built together in the months since, the home they had created, the love that grew stronger with each passing day. "Completely," she answered, tilting her face up to his. "Are you?" His kiss was answer enough, tender and sure, a promise renewed with each touch. When he drew back, his eyes held the future they would share, bright with hope, rich with possibility. "More than I ever thought possible," he murmured. "You and our child, you're my greatest blessings, Olivia Harper. And I intend to spend the rest of my life being worthy of you both." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms and the quiet certainty of their love, a love born in the midst of disaster, nurtured through adversity, and now blooming into a legacy that would endure long after the memory of that fateful storm had faded away. In the years that followed, the Harper Ranch flourished, as did the family that called it home. Thomas Elias Harper arrived on a snowy December morning in 1879, with his father pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door while Mrs. Larson and Aunt Beatrice attended the birth. When Elias was finally allowed to enter, The sight of Olivia cradling their son, exhausted but radiant, brought him to his knees beside the bed. "He's perfect," he whispered, gently touching the downy head with a finger that seemed enormous next to the tiny infant. "Just like his mother." Olivia smiled tiredly, leaning into his kiss. "He has your eyes, I think. And definitely your stubborn streak." He was determined to arrive on his own schedule, regardless of what the midwife said. Elias laughed softly, carefully gathering his son into his arms for the first time. "Welcome to the world, Thomas," he murmured. "We've been waiting for you." The boy grew strong and healthy, the joy of their lives and the pride of his great aunt, who spoiled him shamelessly on her frequent visits. He was 2 years old when his sister, Sarah Beatrice, joined the family, a delicate beauty with her mother's auburn hair and her father's thoughtful nature. With the children came an expansion of the ranch house, additional rooms added as the family grew. Elias's furniture-making skills were put to good use, creating cribs, then small beds, then desks for lessons as the children grew older. Olivia's garden expanded as well, providing not only for their family but enough extra to share with neighbors in need. The community of Whitetail Creek changed and grew around them. The arrival of the railroad in 1882 brought new settlers, new businesses, and new opportunities. Joseph expanded the Silver Dollar Saloon to include a proper hotel, and a schoolhouse was built on land donated by Elias and 2 other ranchers. Through it all, the story of how Olivia and Elias met became something of a local legend, how he had pulled her from the flood, how the town council had deemed her a burden, and how Elias had declared her his blessing instead. It was a tale told to newcomers, a reminder of the community's values and the unexpected ways that love could transform lives. On their 10th wedding anniversary, with the children staying overnight with Aunt Beatrice in town, Elias surprised Olivia with a special gift, a small wooden chest, exquisitely crafted from cherry wood, with her initials inlaid in lighter maple. "It's beautiful," she exclaimed, running her fingers over the smooth surface. "Your finest work yet." "Open it," he urged, watching her face with anticipation. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a delicate silver bracelet with small charms hanging from it: a horse, a house, a boy and a girl, and at the center a heart. "Our life together," Olivia said softly, understanding immediately. "Our blessings." "Exactly." Elias fastened it around her wrist, then kissed her palm. "Though no piece of jewelry could ever capture everything you've given me, everything we've built together." Later that night, wrapped in each other's arms in the quiet of their bedroom, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The flood that had seemed like the end of her world had, in fact, been only the beginning. From disaster had come her greatest joy, her truest love, her most profound blessings. "What are you thinking about?" Elias murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Olivia smiled in the darkness, pressing closer to the warmth of his body. "About storms," she replied, "and how sometimes they wash away one path only to reveal another, better one." He chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly beneath her ear. "Poetic thoughts for the middle of the night." "It's your influence," she teased. "All those books you're always reading to the children." "Hum." He shifted to look down at her, his expression visible in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Speaking of children," Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Yes, I was thinking." His hand drifted to rest on her stomach, the gesture familiar and full of meaning. "Thomas is nearly 8 now, and Sarah's almost 6. Maybe it's time to consider expanding our family again." Her heart swelled with love for this man who had given her so much, who continued to dream with her about their future together. "I've been thinking the same thing," she admitted, covering his hand with her own. In fact, I'm fairly certain that particular blessing is already on its way. The joy that bloomed across his face was worth every moment of the morning sickness she'd been hiding for the past 2 weeks. Truly? He asked, his voice hushed with wonder despite having gone through this twice before. Truly, she confirmed, laughing as he gathered her close, his kisses raining down on her face, her neck, her shoulders. I love you, Olivia Harper, he whispered against her skin, more with each passing day. And I love you, she replied, her heart full to overflowing. My rescuer, my husband, my home. Outside their window, a gentle rain began to fall, nourishing the land they had come to love. But unlike that long-ago storm that had changed their lives, this rain brought only promise of growth, of renewal, of all the blessings yet to come in the life they had built together. One day, one choice, one act of courage at a time. And as they drifted toward sleep in each other's arms, Olivia offered a silent prayer of gratitude for the storm that had once seemed like disaster, but had, in truth, been the beginning of everything good in her life. For sometimes, she had learned, it takes a flood to wash away the old and make room for the new. Sometimes, it takes losing everything to find what truly matters. And sometimes, being called a burden by some allows others to recognize the blessing you truly are.